Warblegrub and the Forbidden Planet. Read by Andrew Barlow.
It looked like an insect. Its shiny black casing would have made any self-respecting beetle chew its claws in envy. It moved like an insect. Delicate wings whirring, it sped through the forest, darting between tangled boughs and wiry branches. But when the clouds parted and moonlight shone down, the probe revealed its mechanical nature. It stopped dead and turned on a pinhead, measuring the changes in the environment. Then its wings became a blur, and off it flew. Finding a stream, the probe followed its winding course downhill, between gnarled roots and boulders covered with beards of moss and blotches of lichen. It paused to listen when a blackbird sang, when a dead branch fell, and again beside a strange bush that overhung the stream. With a short, stout trunk topped by a thick black mop, the bush was clearly unusual, but the noise it was making was even stranger. "I am Warblegrub, Warblegrub am I." The bush was singing. Whirring and clicking excitedly, the probe circled the new phenomenon, its cameras moving rapidly in an eerie imitation of eyes. "I am Warblegrub, Warblegrub am I know where I'm going." The singing stopped abruptly when a thin beam of red light stabbed out from the probe and fell on a patch of smooth bark just above two shining black gems set deep into the trunk. The bush suddenly grew taller, almost doubling in size, and the probe now beheld not a bush but a bearded man in a shabby grey overcoat, his eyes shining like stars. As the probe was processing this new information, it was plucked from the air. The being examined the complex machinery that bleeped and squirmed in his hand. "What are you, you pretty little thing?" he asked, then peered into the array of cameras and sensors. "You are someone's eyes." He sensed he was being watched and followed the signal back to its source, encountering an inquisitive and intelligent mind, a presence he had not felt for some time. He crushed the delicate machine and stuffed it into his pocket, then set off through the trees, singing gruffly to himself. "I am Warblegrub, Warblegrub am I know where I'm going, but I don't know why." In the shadow of the silver-grey moon, a spaceship waited, huge, wedge-shaped, a warship whose gunmetal grey hull bristled with weapons. "No further contact with the probe, Colonel. Shall I launch the spare?" "Save it, SO. Let's take a look for ourselves." One after another, 6 small grey cruisers dropped from the warship's underbelly, left the shadow of the moon, and headed for the nearby planet, a shining blue-green orb. The cruisers began to orbit the planet in delta formation, covering thousands of kilometres in just a few short minutes. Far below, an emerald forest gave way to the undulating ridges of a featureless desert, then a vast shining ocean. Islands and continents passed by, and the silver-grey moon was rising before them, its craters concentrated in patches that formed a familiar pattern. "There's the face, the man in the moon." "Let's not be too hasty, SO. There are dozens more planets to investigate." "There's evidence of habitation, sir. Remains of cities beneath the sand and vegetation. And I'm getting something else, an energy reading. There's something dead ahead." Breaking formation, the cruisers encircled an empty patch of space, pointing at its centre. They fired tracers, and the streams of glowing darts illuminated a thing of extraordinary design. Before them was a gigantic creature, misplaced from some fantastic ocean. Missiles followed the tracers, but with a speed and agility that stunned its attackers, the creature dodged them all and struck the nearest cruiser with a long, sinuous tentacle. The vessel lost power instantly, and the creature grew larger and brighter, seeming immune to the other cruisers' missiles. And when their sister ship exploded, they turned about and fled, with the monster in hot pursuit. The rearmost ship passed too close to the planet and skimmed the atmosphere, and though it pulled clear, it had fallen behind the others. In desperation, it turned and opened fire on its pursuer, but was swept contemptuously aside and broke apart as it went hurtling towards the planet. The surviving cruisers made equally brief and futile stands until only one remained. Evading the lashing tentacles, it headed for the moon. Hard on its heels, the creature struck a glancing blow, but the cruiser's engines roared and it darted away. It remained just out of reach, and on the dark side of the moon, the creature encountered the warship waiting in its path. Suddenly pounded by streams of missiles, the enemy absorbed the barrage. Then the warship paused to reload, and the creature struck like lightning, fixing all its tentacles on its foe. It blazed with colour, growing bigger, and soon dwarfed its enemy. The missiles ceased, the guns fell silent, and the warship succumbed with surprising ease. But just when the struggle seemed to be over, there was a blinding flash. Both warship and creature were destroyed, vaporized in an instant. When nothing remained but tiny fragments of debris floating in empty space, the cruiser that had taken refuge behind the moon reappeared and made straight for the blue-green planet. "What was that, SO?" the colonel demanded, as the cruiser passed into the shadow of the planet's night. "There's nothing like it on the database, sir. Any other energy readings?" The science officer quickly scanned arrays of data from a variety of instruments. "Nothing else." "You still think it's Earth?" He continued to scan. "A near-perfect match, sir. It's Earth." At his words, a cheer resounded around the bridge, and all eyes looked up at the view screen. They were descending through the atmosphere, then flying low over white-capped waves that gleamed in the moonlight. As they approached a long grey shore, tall cliffs reared up, scored with ravines and canyons. Beyond the cliffs were massive towers, which seemed to be covered in shards of glistening ice. As they drew near, however, they saw that the ravines and canyons were the streets of a derelict and decaying city, in the midst of which skyscrapers soared, their shattered windows reflecting moonlight. As they passed between the towers of steel and glass, they gaped, wide-eyed in astonishment. "We're home," whispered the colonel hoarsely. Then he spoke ship-wide over the intercom, his voice solemn and commanding. "Attention, everyone. Our long search is over. And though we are breaking intergalactic law, and will certainly face the severest penalty if caught, I remind you of the oath we all swore: to reclaim our home or die in the attempt. Many of our comrades have already paid the ultimate price, but our duty is to the fallen and to our families, exiled far from our homeworld. Remember, whatever may come, our cause is just, and we will prevail."